Hey, everybody, welcome to the Rise Up podcast. I am excited to be hanging out with Amy Delson today. She is the creative force behind Amy Delson Jewelry, an NYC-based brand known for handcrafted pieces that blend heirloom upcycling, sustainability, and meaningful storytelling. So, everyone, please join me in welcoming Amy to the Rise Up podcast. Hi, Amy.
Hi, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're gonna have a great conversation today. So, all right, so let's start with the beginning. Like, tell me the story of how your brand started. How did it all begin, and what do you stand for today?
Okay, it's kind of a little bit of a roundabout story, a little bit of my life story. I mean, it really began, the genesis of it began when I was a little girl dancing around in my parents' bedroom, taking pieces of jewelry out of my mom's jewelry box, asking the story about each piece, and really latching onto that narrative of layering representative talismans to tell your life story. My earliest entrepreneur experience was in the 80s when my cousin taught me how to make those ribbon barrettes with the little beads on the ends, and I sold some
Ooh.
of those and actually was producing them and selling them. And then as a teenager, my mom, she was responsible for sourcing gifts and jewelry for our synagogue gift shop. So I would go to the Javits Center in the city with her and see the gift and jewelry shows and get inspired with that. But I didn't really come from a retail background in my family. Everyone is doctors, lawyers, teachers. I started out as pre-med at Duke University, and but pre-med English major doing theater and dance. I soon realized that though I wanted to help people, pre-med wasn't really my channel, and leaned more into the writing and self-expression. And when I studied abroad in England, I studied, one of the things I published writing on was Loie Fuller, the performer Loie Fuller, and compared her to the futurist movement. And I was just excited about how people captured that turn of the century excitement with new technology and new marketing styles, the Art Nouveau posters and her performance style, and that sort of proportion of grace and movement and expression just kind of stuck with me. But right after college, my jobs were more in journalism and in advertising. But one thing that really kind of then landed me towards closer where I am now is working at Belk Corporate. I had the chance to interview Oscar de la Renta and Kate Spade when they launched their fragrances at the flagship store at Belk Corporate in South Park, and interviewing them and hearing them with their personal brands, their eponymous brands, and capturing sort of the essence of what women are looking for and how you can cater to those needs and really tap into a feeling. And that sort of stuck with me. But career wise, I then went back to New York because that's really where I saw myself putting my roots down, and I found opportunity in real estate. But the luxury marketing aspect kind of started to creep in to my professional influence. I worked in corporate. What I liked was the architecture and the creativity of the design of old and new buildings in New York, and then meeting all the different creative people in New York that were the clients. And so still sort of looking for my true calling, and took a step off the sort of the professional Ferris wheel when I became a mom. And I really tapped into my creativity and curiosity, and what really made me excited and got to rediscover the world like a child. And when my kids were in preschool and I had some time to myself because I was watching them full time without a nanny or anything, I started taking classes at the 92nd Street Y. Here's where we get into jewelry. And I found my voice creatively. I made this cuff, a brass cuff that I hand sawed and hammered and roll printed with a heat texture technique, and I submitted it to a call for designers at New York Fashion Week and Ultra Fashion Week. And this designer asked me if I could produce 17 more cuffs in a week and a half, because his vision was to have his 9 models walking down with a cuff on each arm. And I said yes, and I was like bleeding and filing and sawing into these, like literally like bleeding into this and thinking, I am crazy, but I'm loving this. And I produced the cuffs. They rocked the runway, and that was kind of my launch moment. But I didn't have any business experience. I'm not an entrepreneur, so it's been like a very steady climb, teaching myself, the necessary skills to have a business, to have a website, and also to build my jewelry technical skills to match my creative vision. So I've since taken all kinds of construction classes at 92nd Street Y, from soldering to stone setting to alternative materials to all kinds of goldsmithing. and chain making. I also studied enameling and FIT, and just always looking to kind of hone that creative voice. And I've since now in the past year made a breakthrough in my presence in a store called Wolf and Badger in Soho. And I'm also on their website and selling to more of an international presence. They have sort of the means to market me out there more. And I'm getting some traction, which I think we'll probably get to later on in the discussion more specifically. But I've been able to take my forms that I made at the bench, like my one-offs. I originally also, I meant to say that upcycling has been a way that I initially got my start in, a way that I continue because I recycle my metal. Initially working with dead stock chains and
Mm.
warehouse materials that I could get my hands on in New York City, closeouts and things. And also women have and men, people in general have like a box of talismans or broken jewelry or one earring or something, some beads they held onto that they want to reconstruct into something. So my early start also was with that kind of thing. But then it's not so scalable, right? So
Mm.
taking a form that I made at the bench like this, I can now, instead of making it over and over, make a mold of it. And so I can have them
Mm.
cast and then they're hand finished. And now I've since been able to work with a CAD designer to take that cuff, for example, and then make it in a design where gemstones can be embedded. And then that
Oh,
can then be
beautiful.
3D printed and done into a mold and cast. And so thank you. So it's a matter of figuring out how to um, scale in the most profitable manner while being able to keep getting my designs out there and still selling what I have. And so that's
Right.
all, quite the learning experience. But in a nutshell, yeah, and what I stand for today, I stand for craftsmanship. I stand for storytelling. Like you said, I stand for sustainable practices and transparency and just helping people express themselves through wearing color and layering and bringing together old and new, taking something from their own, story and then layering in a new piece that symbolizes a new part of their journey or some type of milestone that they're commemorating.
Very cool. So, can you talk to me? I'm always curious about the creative process, that you're when you look at a piece. You mentioned just a little bit ago about kind of that childlike, the best way to say it is just that curiosity, or the childlike approach when you're beginning something. That's an interesting concept. I think that people, when you're in the creative space like yourself, like sometimes we get so jaded by the world that it's hard to just let go and just be a child again. Can you explain to me in those early days when you're kind of in that space, or even maybe even now when you're creating pieces, what's your process of that? Where do you find inspiration from? Where do you find um I guess, where do you find the inspiration from? Let's just stop there.
Yeah, a lot of times I find inspiration from the materials themselves.
Mm.
Like my original earlier designs were from handed down stones. Literally, someone in a class at the Y had some leftover stones that, that they weren't using. And they're like, do you want to make something with this? And then that, to me, I saw them arrayed in a way. And, you know, I'm a bench designer. So I do think and work through a tactile experience with my hands, which is
Mm.
kind of a child, like, as kids you do finger painting, you play with Play-Doh, and as adults
Yeah.
we're not, we don't do those things anymore. And that was like a real uh, opener. I'm the type that also likes to take notes, like I have a
Mm.
type of paper calendar, even though I do, our modern I have an iPhone, but I still, I'm like that tactile, and that's how my creative process works. So I like to start with raw materials and literally work with fire and hammers and saws and things at the bench. But, it's not the most time efficient ways. And sometimes you don't have the materials. Sometimes you start with an idea. So then you're sketching. So I'm just hand drawing things
Mhm.
really with colored pencils and iterating that way. And then bouncing off with a CAD designer. So I can't think, if I were to, even though I sort of almost wish I had the foresight to learn CAD in my earlier years when I was in school, at this point, it's just, I also don't think I don't creatively process that way. And some people do. Some people can, get juiced and really see the layers through that digital interface. But for me, I need to draw it and describe it verbally or have a
Mhm.
model made out of, something representative that then that person can take their 3D brain and code it in and then that's really how I've learned to scale, because it's sort of just more time efficient than me taking a piece of silver and shaping it and forging it into
Yeah.
this shape. Rather, I can sketch that shape and then have a CAD designer make it. But in order to arrive at this design vocabulary, I had to experience it at the bench. I had to
Yeah.
work with a round bar of silver and think, how am I going to make this into a bangle? I'm not just going to make it a plain round bangle. I want to hammer it in opposing forces and make a dynamic shape that has like an undulating form. And then that's sort of just, that's how I found my voice. And that's how I decided to keep going, because it just felt so good making things like that.
Mm.
That's a frustration though, in terms of having it be a business, because then you get to a point where you have to stop making things and you have to focus on selling them, and marketing
Mhm.
them and doing all that aspect. And so you have to continue to stay inspired creatively, making things while also doing the other side.
Yeah. And you're a mom, right?
Yes, I'm a
And
mom,
like life and all that,
and
right?
I'm
That
a,
comes
and
into
I'm a
that.
wife
So
too. And my kids are teenagers now, so now I have the luxury of them being
yeah.
a little more independent. They even like to cook, so I'm so blessed
Yeah.
that, but I also like that really was that hands-on rolling around on the floor mom at Gymboree, and
Mm.
in the sandbox learning how to share, and doing all those hands-on things
Yeah.
with my boys. And my boys were born just over 2 years apart, so I had two toddlers running around wrestling. And I felt like I really like found my calling in that moment, but I knew it was fleeting. I couldn't
Yeah.
be a mom to young kids forever, and I also knew that you could burn out if you had to do that forever, because it is an exhausting, it's a wonderful time, but it's also very fleeting. So I always had in my mind that feeling that I want to grow a nugget of something that I owned myself, and
Mm.
have maybe a personal brand that tapped into this feeling I'm feeling, that helped me create, that I could share with people. And that's kind of how it evolved.
That's awesome. So how would you describe the type of clients that or collectors that most resonate with you and your brand?
They're creative people. I call my aesthetic boho chic. It's kind of bohemian, but it's also chic. So it's artistic but elevated in sort of a cosmopolitan way.
Mm.
So those are the types of people that respond to what I'm doing. They aren't the type that want the cookie cutter, perfectly symmetrical. They want something that's a little more organic looking, something that might evoke a "where'd you get that" comment, or just kind of a just not the
Mm.
typical standard, not boring. I mean, some people like that aesthetic, but my aesthetic is just, a little more artistic but elevated. Not I'd say I've evolved from craftsy into a more elevated bohemian
Okay.
voice.
Do you have a particular metal that you like to work with, by the way, or material?
Yeah, I mean, I something that was the best thing to work with, but it's just so expensive. I had taken a goldsmithing class and I worked in 22 karat gold. So I alloyed the gold myself,
Mm.
starting with the pellets, and then of 24, and then you put a little tiny bit of fine silver and a little bit of copper, and you burn it down, and you melt it into, and then I had to mill it and roll it out, actually made chain. And anyway, the higher karat gold is like butter. It's like so soft to work with in terms of manipulating it and
Mm.
being able to shape it and form it. And then silver is like a harder material to work in. But when I first started out, I had a lot of freedom with brass and copper, because it was kind of, like low risk. It wasn't very expensive of a material, so there was a
Yeah.
lot of freedom in that. And that those metals are also very malleable. So I tend to do most of my work in silver, just because of like the price that I work
Yeah.
with, accessible in terms of wire and things. And something that I think in the market has been evolving is sort of like an affordable luxury, where people are combining two-tone metals, gold and silver, or sterling silver with 18 karat gold over it, vermeil, which I have here, which I offer along with 14 karat gold. So, I love to work in the higher karat gold,
Yeah.
but it's the price of gold is so high. So,
Mhm.
I work with what I can. And I have yet to personally work in platinum, although my own engagement ring is in platinum. And I feel like that's a really classic, material. But I hear it has its own set of challenges to work with. So that might be on the horizon for me, to working with platinum personally,
Uh,
although I can cast things in platinum. So if someone wants something, if I design something, I can have it made in platinum. But as far as me at the bench with my torch, I haven't worked in it yet.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious. Some people have like very specific, materials. Like I was talking to a guy the other day who has like he loves particular kind of woods that he works with,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
all that exotic woods, and it's kind of his process. But okay, so but not we're not talking about him. We're talking about you. So what do you feel best sets you apart from other businesses in the in the competitive luxury space? Is it that a kind of affordability luxury but yet affordable, or is there something else that you would
I
like
think
to
that,
share?
that's kind of the niche I'm going for. I did kind of see a need in the market for an elevated there's really like a fashion jewelry, but it's between fine jewelry and fashion jewelry. It's I'm bridging that
Mm,
gap really because I'm using real gemstones. They're semi-precious stones primarily, and I've started working. So I work with like garnets and citrines and topaz and amethysts, and you have a variety of colors that to work with in that realm. And then I've started to work with lab diamonds, which is something that I'm seeing in the market as far as
mm,
bringing affordable luxury. My I made a whole alphabet that I made inspired by the Art Nouveau lettering on posters and in like the 60s rock posters. And it's kind
yeah.
of a melty kind of I've carved it in wax initially. And then to set it apart, the font sets it apart that it's not just a font that you can generate on a computer, but it's hand done. And then I added a lab diamond to it because it elevates it to like a fine. Actually, I have some of them here. I don't know if you can see them well, but an A, a D, and
Oh,
a G.
beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. So they're kind of sculptural. So
Very
that's kind of
cool.
my signature voice that you don't necessarily see. And then the lab diamond element, which makes it the affordable luxury. And so I guess that's how I'm distinguishing myself and offering a range. I can do the custom very high end, but then I also see a place for that person wearing something that's layered, that's at a lower price point. So I think that luxury customer, I'm speaking to that luxury customer. That's not
And
just some
so
just
where is your kind of pricing range so far? I mean, we're not. I know it's going to be a variable because you got the more affordable side, and then you get
yeah.
the more custom bespoke level. But where do you sit in that spectrum?
I guess the sweet spot is around like 200-ish, 100, 200. I mean, I have things that are from like 60, smaller earrings that are in the 60s to a $3,000 gold piece. So
Yeah. Okay.
but it's under 5,000
Okay.
is generally the
Okay.
range. And then, kind of ranges. I'm looking to basically maybe hone that because I've been, you hear that you need to sort of niche if you really want to. That my challenge is really growing and scaling, and I'm looking at doing that in the most profitable way while staying true to my voice and where I want to be in the
Mm.
market. So, it's kind of unhealthy to say, oh, I can be all things to everyone, because then you're not going to be really great at anything to anybody in
That's true.
some theories. So yeah, I am looking to, you know, maybe hopefully as things develop further, get more of a hint at one specific row. But for now, I think maybe what sets me apart is that I do still offer that range.
Okay. Okay. So what kind of shifts are you seeing in the industry right now, the jewelry industry?
Yeah. I'm definitely seeing people focusing on the sustainability aspect. It's funny because I've been upcycling, for more than 10 years. And then it seems like over the past 3 years, everyone's upcycling and recycling. And I did it out of necessity, but also out of moral, compass. I saw a lot of junk jewelry out there. I saw a lot on the internet that was mass produced, and that was of poor quality. And I don't want people to have a bunch of junk that they're not wearing anymore. So,
Hmm.
I see that that's a good trend in the industry. I'm seeing technology taking more of a step forward, more designers learning to work with computer design so that they can scale, and not so many of just the bench artisan designers anymore. I'm
Yeah.
seeing the use of the things I kind of mentioned, the lab diamonds I'm seeing, and also the affordable luxury aspect, I think, is a trend that I'm picking up on, that I'm latching on to. Um, People that are using mixed metals, that are bringing silver, an elevated version of silver done well, not just in a craftsy manner, but in a
Yeah.
fine finely done way. I think that's a trend that I'm seeing that I want to be a part of
Okay.
as well.
So what part of your business right now is getting the most attention? I mean, you mentioned kind of scaling, but is it like, are the tariffs affecting you? Sales? Like, what's if you're like every day you're like, what is my focusing on?
Yeah.
What's keeping your eye?
I'm always trying to help my user experience on my website. I am constantly improving my website, getting feedback and making adjustments as I can. I made the shift to Shopify to make it more shoppable through social media. So that's
Mm.
something that I can recommend to other sellers out there. I had a website prior on a different platform and you couldn't link right through from your posts to shop them as
Oh,
easily.
yeah.
So something like that Shopify has is something that I'm constantly focused on. The tariff thing does affect me because my core pieces, I developed a relationship with a family run business in Jaipur, India. And my thoughts and prayers are with the Indian people today because of that plane crash. I don't know if you heard, but anyway, I have a factory in Jaipur that I've worked with to make some like 10 of a kind of some of my core pieces that I have stocked in the Wolf and Badger store, all handcrafted there. And the tariffs were initially, put out there, and then the 90-day period of discussion is
Uh,
happening.
the
So
up and down, backwards, forward,
I
sideways.
know. So I've been reluctant to. I have some
Um,
new designs in the hopper that I want to develop, and I'm trying to price about the best way to produce them. And I do my initial work in Manhattan, and then if I want to have it in a store, I have to think about how can I make more of them. And so, but I think July 9th is when we're going to know maybe more about what's being determined with that. So yeah, it affects me a little bit, but at the same time, I've always been building in New York City, so I have the capacity to either make things myself or work with people on 47th Street that can turn it around and make it in the city. It just costs more to do it
yeah.
here.
Yeah. Okay. So what's like over the last year or even so far this year, what has been like a really exciting business win that you've had so far?
Yeah, something really exciting was when the store staff in Soho told me that at Wolf and Badger that a tourist had come into the city from Australia asking for a specific cuff that they saw on their website that they wanted to buy for their wife. That was one of my designs. And they had sold out of it. And because I'm in the city, I was able to take one right over to them. But I thought that was a big win. Someone came in from
Oh.
Australia to Manhattan, asking for something of mine. And then another big win I had recently, I shipped some earrings to Dubai, also through Wolf and Badger, and I've shipped to the Netherlands, to all parts of the UK. So just having my international presence, like knowing that someone is out there in different parts of the world wearing jewelry that I created, is, I think, a big business win for me at this stage and where I am.
Yeah. So how's that make you feel as a creative person?
It
Like,
makes me feel amazing. It feels like people are
yeah.
seeing they're seeing me and they're enjoying it and they're making it a part of their story so that there's nothing like it. I want to multiply it.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, maybe people will get to, hear this and get to, get exposed to your brand and all that. We'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end here. But so outside of Wolf and Badger,
Yeah.
right, and your website, how else do your high value clients find you?
They find me through word of mouth
Yeah.
still, through I literally, my there's a guy who has a boat near my father-in-law, and he's told a story about how his wife had a 14 karat gold ring stolen many years ago, and for her birthday, a big birthday, he wanted to try and recreate this ring. And
Yeah.
so through word of mouth, through that, he said, well, maybe, talk to my daughter-in-law, maybe she can do it. So I was able to whip up a design based on his description of this ring that had been stolen, and recreated it for him, and he gave it to her. And so that was just kind of a word of mouth referral. That was a big project that was very exciting. When people find me through Instagram, through DM, through just other jewelry designers and sort of networking groups that I'm in, just I think also through Wolf and Badger. I mean, they're a B Corp, so they have the brand trust. They vet everyone who is carried. All the independent brands that they carry are vetted to be ethical, sustainable. Have a very be filtered in such a way that they check off a lot of criteria. I'm a female-owned business. They're very, conscious of representation. And so I think people trust the Wolf and Badger brand. So that's been a good way that I've been getting out there. What was your question again?
No, I mean, I was just curious about how you got like
Oh, how
how
people are
people
finding
find
me.
you.
I think they're
Yeah,
finding me through that. I think there's
yeah,
a trust factor that honestly I would rather, I want them to come straight to me. I want them to come to amydelsonjewelry.com or DM me on Instagram at Amy Delson Jewelry because, that directly we can just begin a dialogue and, whether it's a wholesale or a, partnership or a
yeah,
collaboration or a pop-up opportunity, anything, very open. And that maybe that sets me apart too. I'm accessible. I'm a one-woman show, so I'm here and I'm
yeah.
open to ideas and partnerships. And
Yeah, so if somebody's listening to this and you want a little collab action, hit
yeah,
up
let's work
Amy. She
together.
can she'll work with you. Maybe do a little fashion show or something. Who knows like
Yes.
what's going
I
on. You never know where a conversation like what we're having today will lead you. So we'll see. But
Absolutely. I've done some photo shoots through, clothing designer wants jewelry for their and that's how I've collaborated and been able to get photography and we both benefit. So other creatives, other designers that, want to work with me, I'm open to that.
very cool. So what is the what's kind of one, marketing challenge or business challenge you'd like to really dial in over the next 6-12 months?
I would like to optimize sort of flows in terms of what you can do with email flows and sort of reaching out to customers more and developing that experience further. For example, if they are shopping for something and they leave it in their shopping cart and then they don't end up purchasing, I know there's a way to follow up with them or just to sort of keep the experience, going and see how I can further help people. I want to just help the user experience and make that better and get better at having more people share their user generated content to get the brand out there. That's something that I would like to work on over the next year.
Very cool. Very cool. So what, kind of as you're looking forward, kind of shifting gears here a little bit, what does the evolution of Amy Delson Jewelry look like to you?
Yeah, I have so many ideas in my head that the challenge is having the wherewithal to produce them. But I do see a lifestyle brand. I have designs for candle holders and I have a
Hmm.
clutch purse, and I have ideas about the zipper pull being a jeweled item and, kind of the full picture of the woman, the accessories and the experience at home. So stay tuned.
All right. So what's holding you back from that? Let's dive into that a little bit. Is it finances? Is it just time? Is it like what's the
Yeah, it's the wherewithal. I'm you know, constantly fighting the desire to say that I'm not a business person because, I'm an artist, but no, I am a business person. So I'm working on a more thoughtful business plan in terms of developing wholesale relationships and then making it happen in terms of evolving that into the lifestyle brand. But there's also, as you know, there's so much that has to go into the back end with
Mhm.
production costs and even just making samples that, it does get a little overwhelming. I just keep taking one step at a time. And then
So if you could like wave a magic wand and fix one thing in your business right now, what would
I guess it would just be to have, as anyone would say, endless cash flow so that I could
yeah,
produce as many designs as I know I have in me. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
get them out there and get them presented in the best light, have the best photography, have the best photo shoots. I'm learning to use AI tools that could potentially help in a more economical way. They've went to a Tech Week event this week at the Shopify headquarters in Soho, and there was a fashion technology company that does AI showing garments on people
Yeah.
walking and you can choose the scene and do photo shoots that way. And although I'm weary of things looking like fake, at the
Yeah.
same time I am observant of the cost savings in terms of not having to hire a model and a hairstylist and all the things that you have to do for a photo shoot, and still giving the user, the shopper, their experience of seeing it in a proportional manner, moving,
Mhm.
like the technology of having a bracelet move on the person. And
Mm.
I would like to be able to work in that realm more, and to just be able to show more. And there are ways to render your designs before you actually produce them and then have them produced. But it's a cart before the horse, chicken and egg. It's always like, put the money into the renderings, or have real pieces and photograph
Mhm.
them, or how do I best represent this vision? So that's what I'm facing every day.
All right. Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, the AI piece that you're talking about, I agree with you that there are some components of it that you're like, oh, that's like super cheesy,
Right.
and then you don't want a prospective client to think that what you do is cheesy, right? Like,
Right.
so you want to be able to showcase the actual quality and the beauty that you put your heart and soul into creating. I think eventually technology is going to get there. You're starting to see it. I mean, if you went to an event and you're seeing that, then it's getting there. It's going to be here before we know it, though. So,
Yeah, this company
um,
says they're rolling out a jewelry feature, and I said, put me on that list. I want to test it out as soon as it comes.
yeah,
So, there aren't very good. I've demoed some things out there, and I've done my own work with Canva and taking the background out and superimposing a jewelry item just to show the scale of it if I don't have it photographed on a person. I mean, I've had to problem solve and work around, you know,
yeah.
whichever way I can figure out.
Yeah, that's the plight of the entrepreneur, right? Or the creative individual slash entrepreneur. Like, you gotta figure it out. You have to trial and error. You have to go, okay, does this work? Does this look good? No, yes, it does. Like,
Fail
and
forward, learn to love failure.
yeah, failure is part of the journey, right? So that kind of a good segue into the next question. So if you're looking back, like kind of retrospectively at your younger self, what is one piece of business advice you would give to yourself, and what would that be?
I think look at taking some business classes, some sort of like accounting or economics or some sort of financial business preparation. My two sons, ironically, are studying finance. They want to work in the finance industry, which is great. It's, where I've leaned so much into being an artist that if I could tell my younger self, it would be to, I didn't know my calling would lead me to entrepreneurship, but had I known, I would have studied business in a more, in a more serious way, although it's changed so much over the years. I mean, through the internet, through social media, now through AI, the whole face of business has evolved so much that it's hard to even have known, what. But also just to embrace technology earlier. One of my first jobs in advertising was interviewing, and there was one firm that was offering me something, and it was looking towards doing print ads for Maybelline, and I got to name lipstick colors and things like that, and it was for actual magazine ads. And I'm dating myself, but this was like the late 90s. And the other opportunity was for an emerging field called the internet, and at Ogilvy and Mather, and it was like the stepchild website for them. And I was like,
Oh, it's
I
a big
stopped
agency.
interviewing in that realm, and not like thinking back, I think if I had kept interviewing on that realm, could I have entered into technology and,
Yeah.
marketing at an earlier stage at a higher level with the foresight? But at the time, I thought the print and magazine ads were more exciting. It was more luxurious. It was more tangible. I
Yeah.
respond to that. So I did, the abstract internet advertising. I had no idea that internet advertising, that communication and business would really evolve and revolve around the internet in
Yeah.
such a way that I as a dancer and as a young performer and a writer, I never really wanted to be sitting at a desk all day, and I still don't. But the reality of technology, it has its pluses and minuses. It lets you do so many wonderful things, but then you almost feel bound to it.
Right. So what is one thing you would love to leave, or that you hope that our, listeners, somebody listening to your story today can walk away from? Like, what's the one, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have to be one thing, but what do you hope somebody learns from your journey and hearing from you?
I think if they're a creative, passionate person and they have a voice, then they should listen to that inner voice and they will make it happen. And you can find the tools, especially now with ways you can educate yourself online, again, with AI, asking questions, that you can make it happen, even if it's a mid-career change, even if, or let's say you're a mom and you just have a new idea and you want to jump back into working and you want to start a business. I say go for it, because now there are so many tools out there and there are so many networking groups that you can join. 10, 12 years ago, there wasn't as much available. So the takeaway would be to listen to your inner voice and show the world what you have to say. And you can teach yourself the skills that you need. And the right people will come into your life, like Justin
Mhm.
has found me. And each step will lead you to the next thing. And, that is a viable way to be.
Very cool. There's a quote that or a kind of a mantra that I've learned personally, and it's very appropriate to what you just said. Is basically you follow why you do something, not how you do it,
Yeah.
because you'll figure out the how. Like the how will come. Like you mentioned, like you knew that you had something inside of you that you needed to, and you really enjoyed it. It's a passion that you have, and that comes through like very clearly in your designs and your inspiration and all of that. And I would encourage everyone to check out your website for sure. And it's Amy Delson, AMYDELSON jewelry.com. And I'll put a link, wherever this is posted. So if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on our website or, whatever the different platforms are, there'll be a link to Amy's work so you can see what she does and reach out to her if you have like a collab idea or something that would be, like if you're a photographer, if you're in the fashion industry, or even something like maybe you want to do a little pop-up show or something, like
Yes,
hit Amy
please.
up. She would be great.
And people in Manhattan and New York City in general, I am here and I love to meet up in person and, brainstorm. So definitely reach out to me, local people too.
Cool. Well, Amy, thank you so much for spending some time today. It has
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure hearing your story, and I can't wait to see where you go with the brand. I'm really excited. So
Thank you so much for having me.